Okay, so today I got a real mystery, a real who's done it. Whether this guy was involved, whether he was a victim, whether he was a accomplice, co-conspirator. It's a doozy. So, this is the case of Dale Kerstetter. So let me give you the story. Dale is 50 years old. He works at the Corning glass factory, and I believe this was in Bradford, Pennsylvania. So it's kind of close to me. I'm definitely familiar with Corning. They had a plant where I grew up at, not the same as this. There's different plants. But on September 12th, 1987, Dale Kerstetter was a security guard at the Corning plant, and he worked I guess you would say the midnight shift. I think he was to check in at 10:30 at night, and he worked till 7 in the morning. Sometime within 10:30 at night when he checked in until 7 o'clock a.m. when he was relieved, he went missing. So, yeah, right now just a missing persons case, right? Well, they soon discovered that $250,000 worth of platinum piping was taken. Now, platinum piping is, according to some sources, more valuable, at least in 1987, than gold is. So, the question quickly becomes, was Dale Kerstetter the thief and organized the crime and his own disappearance, or was there something more sinister? Well, what kind of disturbed me is they treated this as a missing persons case, but it seemed like it didn't have a lot of urgency until the manager decided 4 days later to check the surveillance cameras. Now, this really boggles my mind. Okay? First of all, should not be the first place that you check for clues. Now, this manager had gone on to say that Dale was a marginal employee. Now, Dale had worked at this Corning factory plant for 29 years. He started working there in 1959. To call him a marginal employee, I mean, yeah, you have that right to do so, but a man who has worked at the same company for that long without being terminated, without being fired, he must be doing something right. During this time, Corning was having a lot of layoffs. And in fact, I believe Dale had to take a pay cut. It wasn't significant, but any pay cut is significant. But he didn't lose his job because I'm assuming his years of service there. I would question this manager, number one, as to what a marginal employee is. Is it somebody that comes in and just does his job every day? Because to me, that's not marginal. That's what's expected of you. So, his choice of words there, I'm a little concerned with, but not as concerned as I am as waiting 4 days to check surveillance video. Now, thank goodness, this is 1987. So you didn't have a lot of surveillance videos. So thank goodness that you did. Now, when he checks this, did I mention it was 4 days later? Okay, 4 days later, when Dale's relief shows up at 7:30 in the morning and says, oh, well, Dale's not sitting where he normally does. Go in the lunchroom, find his lunch pail's there, nothing's eaten out of it. Goes out into the parking lot, finds Dale's truck, keys are in the ignition, a full carton of cigarettes, unopened on the front seat, along with an empty holster to a .22 caliber pistol, but no Dale. Wouldn't you think at that point in time, the plant manager, the human resources department, some sort of supervisor would be like, oh shit, we have a problem here, right? Dale's not here. Even if you don't know that there's a theft, let's take that out of the equation. There's no crime committed, but Dale's not there, and you have these clues to that something's wrong. Number one, his truck being there. Number two, that he didn't eat his lunch. Number three, all the unopened carton of cigarettes. When you know you've worked there with this guy, he's been there for 30 years, that he smokes all the time. It doesn't take a detective to know, hey, this isn't good. But you wait, did I mention this? 4 days to review that surveillance video. Now I know hindsight's 20/20. I know it. But that's a mistake. Plain and simple. That surveillance footage should have been reviewed that day. Would it have made a difference? Maybe, because guess what they find on the surveillance video? They see Dale. But guess what? They see a masked intruder. They have an offender. Then, oh, we better start looking to see if anything's missing. That's when they determine, hey, the platinum pipe, $250,000 of it is missing. Now, according to my research, the offender cut out little sections of this pipe, and according to the newspaper report I read, it weighed about 24 pounds. This is going to be significant. So the offender steals 24 pounds worth of product. The surveillance video, which is not good, okay? I viewed it. It is not good as a good way of explaining it, other than to say it is shitty, if you know what I mean. You can imagine 1987 surveillance video. Yes, shitty. However, you're able to see an intruder. You're able to see the intruder and Dale converse. The intruder is in that plant a good amount of time. He doesn't appear to be in a hurry. Now, that's arbitrary because you can't really tell that from the video. At one point in the video, you can see the offender standing behind Dale, kinda, as if he could have a weapon at his back. They walk towards the surveillance camera, and Dale specifically looks up at it. Now, the plant manager says that it looks like Dale may have been like given the FU to the company. Look, I can steal your platinum. There's nothing you can do about it. Again, just like any other case we've ever looked at, you have two sides. One, Dale had nothing to do with it, and other, that Dale was involved in it. So what do we have to do in order to solve this case? Well, the first thing is we have to look at victimology, right? What type of person is Dale? Is he the type of person that, number one, would do something like this? Number two, does he have the means, the capability, the mind in order to pull this off? Well, we want to look at victimology for that. What type of person was he? Well, I can tell you right away, I mean, just by him working at the same job for almost 30 years. He's a dedicated person. Now, you could break that down and say a dedicated employee. You could break it down and say dedicated husband, whatever it is. Fact is, I am sure he had turmoil within those 30 years, and he worked through it and stayed with the same company. Now, he was an Air Force veteran. His family described him as an outdoorsman, simple, very kind, trustworthy. For the most part, you would expect a family member to say that. But his friends have said that as well. So now I have the preponderance of two types of people. I always say that if you want the real scoop of somebody, their victimology, you go back to their high school. You talk to the people in their high school, their teachers, and not just friends, but people in their class. They'll tell you. That's where you get the true scoop from. You're not going to get it from family members. But one of the things that was stood out in this victimology that bothered me was they said he enjoyed the outdoors, which no problem. That's my favorite pastime, the outdoors, but is skydiving. When I saw that, I sat up in my chair a little bit more, because what is skydiving? That's a thrill-seeking, adventurous type of endeavor. Not sure what he did as an Air Force veteran, but skydiving piqued my interest. Now, it's the only thing out of his victimology that made me feel a little bit, oh, okay, he could be involved in this. He had been divorced 10 years prior to this crime, so probably 1977 he was divorced. He had 6 children, from what I understand, 5 daughters, 1 son who lived with him during this time. And they were all older. I mean, what's Dale? Dale was 50 years old. I hate to say this because it may not be true and it may not have any relevance. But I say it because as a detective, you look for things that stick out. Yes, you do have gut feelings, you have hunches, but you don't necessarily act on them. You don't go down that road. It's just something you know, and you move forward. When I look at Dale's picture, several pictures that I saw, I got to be honest with you, I'm shocked that he was only 50 years old. He looked much older than that. Now, that could be genetics. That could be a number of things. Stress. I do notice that a lot in people that abuse or drink heavily. We're talking alcohol. See, and the reason I say I hate to say that is because I don't want to put that on somebody when it may not be true. Okay? But he looks 70 years old to me. And here he's only 50. I mean, I'm 48. I am by no means a beauty queen. But if you put Dale's photo, here, and I'll do that right now. I'll put Dale's photo up next to mine, and 2 years apart. Maybe that's a bad analogy. Maybe I shouldn't even have showed that, because it may have zero relevance. But when you look at profiling a crime or a criminal, those are things that you have to take into consideration. Let's say I knew nothing about Dale's background, nothing at all, and I just had a picture to go on. That's one of the, I hate to lack of a better word, assumption that I would have. But it's more of, it's not a deduction, but you're throwing things out there. Stress, genetics. I'd like to see pictures of his kids. I'd like to see pictures of his parents at that age. Stuff like that. Now, I'm getting off track here because Dale's appearance, although could have something to do with this, because if it is stress-induced, that's important to know. But in this case, I don't think it's important to know. Just looks like he lived a hard life. Could have been from drinking. Could have just been because he's such a hard worker. Okay? I've seen a lot of that too. These people that just work hard in their life every day, which appears that he did. Maybe that's why. So that's the victimology on Dale Kerstetter. There's not a lot there, but that's more than you get on some of these cases. Now, let's look at the timeline, okay? Dale arrives at work at 10:30. At every hour, so at 11:30, he is supposed to check in his rounds. That he made his rounds, check things. He didn't do that. At least he stopped doing that from what I could tell at midnight. When you watch the tape, which they did, that I mentioned 4 days later, they noticed that the offender in the mask arrived about 10:40. So 10 minutes after Dale relieved the security guard, this guy showed up. That tells you something, and I'll get into what that tells me later on here. By 7 a.m., his relief shows up, and like we've already discussed, Dale's gone. So what happened between 10:40, when that offender showed up, and 7 a.m.? Well, a theft occurred. A murder may have occurred, and or Dale is involved. Now, what do I think? Well, I broke this down in my notes here by a couple of things. The offender. The guy, just think if they didn't check that surveillance, right? If they didn't check that surveillance, they would have had no clue that an offender showed up. It just, hey, Dale's missing. That's all we have. Truck's in the parking lot, didn't eat his lunch, gone. That goes for some of these crimes that there is previous to this, where there is no surveillance footage. You just don't know. In this case, you have a huge clue, and it paid dividends. You see an offender. So, if I was to assess what I see, not just under surveillance, but the totality of everything's. Number one, I would say that offender is an ex-employee. Now, I don't want to be specific and say he's an ex-employee of that Corning plant. But I would say he is either definitely an employee of a glass manufacturing plant that knows that platinum pipe is, I mean, would you know where that is? In a factory? Unless you work there? Or he is friends or family member with somebody that works there. That is without a doubt. There is no burglar, robber in the world that would go to a glass factory with the intent of robbing it of its contents if you did not know what's there. Now, in addition to that, this guy spent a lot of time in there. He was seen talking to Dale. Now, we don't know what that conversation is. That conversation could be very one-sided. Hey, show me where this stuff is in this huge plant, or I will simply kill you right here where you sit. Or it could be Dale recognizes him. Even though he has a mask on, you can tell somebody by the way they talk. He's saying, don't do this, don't put me in this situation. Hey, you're going to tell... Any one of those. You don't know what that conversation is going to be. But what I do know is it is somebody that's familiar with glass factories and the contents provided in it. The number 2 takeaway I can say about the offender without a doubt is he had connections in the criminal underworld. Now, what do I mean? I don't mean to sound all, I don't know, smart by saying criminal underworld. Well, what's that mean? That simply means he has friends that are criminals, or at least know criminals. Now, why do I say that? Well, I say that because platinum pipe is not something you can go to the pawn shop and get rid of, right? If you're a burglar, you go in, you steal radios, you steal TVs, steal weapons, you take it to a pawn shop, get rid of it, and get money, right? You ain't doing that with platinum pipe, okay? That has to be remelted. It has to be fenced. And by fenced, I mean you got to be able to get rid of it. Same can be said for like diamonds. You're going to rob jewelry, diamonds. It really does you no good to have that unless you can get rid of it, right? So that is a big thing. You have to be able to know how to get rid of this stolen item. So you're going to have to, it's plutonium. I'm thinking of Back to the Future. I just watched that the other night again. Great movie, by the way. Any movie that goes back in time, I like. I just finished watching a series 11/22/63 about trying to go back in time and save Kennedy from being assassinated. Very good series. I like that as well. As I always and often do, I digress. Back to the crime at hand and fencing a product that you have. You have to be able to get rid of it. Because if you steal platinum and you just have it, that does you no good. You're no better off. You have to be able to get rid of it. So I would think that the offender had to have connections in that world. He also probably has a criminal history because of that. Not necessarily, but probably. And again, this offender showing up 10 minutes after Dale got there, that is either one of two things, and not the third. One being Dale was in on it, and Dale told him what time to be there. You know. 2, he knew the shift of the security guards, and he was watching and waiting for that relief to happen. And that can go back to Dale being involved. But I'd want to know more about the first security guard that he relieved. Was he bigger? Was he stronger? Was he more apt to defend himself? Well, there's only one offender here that's caught on camera anyhow. Dale, remember what I said, his physical appearance. I think he was only 5 foot. I mean, he was short. 5'5" maybe. I could have read that wrong, but again, he looked frail to me. Old, weak, like somebody. And I know this from doing research on people that kill police officers. Those offenders will size you up. When they have been interviewed, they say that. I looked to see if his shoes were shined. I looked to see what type of physical condition he was in. You know, because those are the ones that I would attack. The ones that had dirty shoes, unkept pants and shirt, not pressed, not physically fit. Maybe that same logic is applied to this case. And it very well could be. Now let's look at, you know, was this a murder? Well, there's certain aspects of it that make me believe that. The one, his truck still being there. Okay. How's he getting around? It ain't like he just stole $250,000 cash and he disappears where he can buy a new vehicle and go live a life of luxury on an island. He can't do that. If he was involved, he has $250,000 of nothing. Now, it's not to say he couldn't steal it, give it to somebody right there and then in the parking lot, and they exchange money. Yes, that could happen, but I don't see that happening. One of the biggest, although it seems like it's the tiniest of clues for me to make me believe that this was murder, was the unopened carton of cigarettes on the front seat of Dale's truck. Now, why do you say that? Let's say Dale was involved in this theft. And Dale was orchestrating his own disappearance. As an avid smoker, would he not take that? Why would he risk, let's say, going down to a convenience store and buying another whole carton of cigarettes? And risk being seen so somebody can say, hey, he was here at midnight. And he was with a guy who was driving a black truck. If you just masterminded this great theft, why would you be that careless and leave cigarettes there and go buy them somewhere else? Wouldn't happen. He would have taken those carton of cigarettes. Now, what also is in his truck is of great importance to me, or lack of what's in his truck, is the missing .22 pistol. Now, his friends have said that he would go on skunk runs. Now, skunk runs was they would go out, drink, out in these back roads, and shoot skunks. He also told the same friend that he would carry that pistol with him at work while he did his rounds, and he wouldn't be caught without it. Now, for you that don't know, a .22 firearm is a small caliber weapon, and you could probably tuck it in your jacket pocket, but he had a holster. Why didn't he take the holster with him? Did he just have the weapon in his pocket? That's something Victimology might be able to tell you by interviewing his family, friends, co-workers, but I don't know the answer to that, but it bothers me that the holster's in there and the weapon isn't. The uneaten lunch. Why would he bother to pack a lunch and take with him and not eat it if he knew that he was going to disappear that night with $250,000 worth of platinum? All three of those things make me believe that he was more than likely murdered. But let's look at the flip side. See, I always like doing this, because there's always two sides of every story. You don't want to just tell one side of the story and have everybody tunnel visioned on that. Hey, let's look at the possibility that he was in on it. He was having financial problems. Now, the length or the greatness of this financial difficulty is certainly contentious on both sides. He lived in a trailer park. He wasn't that much in debt. He did take a pay cut, so he had some financial difficulties. I don't see that it was greater than what most people have in life, but it could play a factor. The video of him, although is horrible and grainy, did not appear that he was in much of a distress. You can't tell much off of that, though, because, again, just like grief, everybody acts different. If somebody comes in and puts a weapon to your head, one person may act differently than another person. So you can't tell too much off of that. That's why I don't believe in body language and body assessment and stuff like that. Everybody acts different. If there's a baseline towards it and you can prove it to me, he normally does this, but then maybe I'll buy into it a little bit. For the most part, no. Third thing that he could be a conspirator is that his body was never found. Right? That's the biggest one. Where is he? Well, I'm going to tell you what I think more than likely occurred. Now, based on my research, what I think happened is that more than likely Dale Kerstetter was murdered. And in fact, in I believe 2014, he was declared legally dead by the courts. Originally, I believe in 1990, they petitioned the court, and I hate when people say they. Explain who they is. That's one of my biggest pet peeves. People will say, well, they say this. They believe that, well, who's they? Well, I won't do that to you. I explained to you who they are. They being Kerstetter's family, at least some of them, in 1990 said that he was legally dead, and actually the attorney that represented the family is somebody that I am familiar with. He's actually from my hometown area. But they did not win that suit. In 2014, they did win the suit to declare Dale legally dead, which entitled the family to pension, money, etc. It is my belief that Dale was murdered, and I didn't tell you why the biggest indication of that would be. Now, I failed to mention that the state police brought in K9 units to track his scent. And they tracked Dale's scent around the building, which is typical of him doing his rounds. And they also tracked it up to where the platinum was missing, which was not part of his rounds. To me, that tells me that the offender, although familiar with the glass industry, the plants, he was not from that area. He was not an ex-employee of that Corning branch, because he made Dale, whether at gunpoint or not, take him to where this platinum was. That's why Dale's scent was tracked up there. Now, the biggest reasoning for him, in my mind, being murdered is that the police showed the surveillance video, which was very grainy again, but it clearly showed that the offender used a pallet jack. And if you guys, I'm sure some of you are familiar with what that is, some of you aren't. It lifts real heavy things that you can't carry. It's like a portable manual forklift. And it's operated, I believe, by hydraulics, so it can push things out. And one of the video stills from the security camera, it showed the masked offender pushing this out with a bag on it, which almost looked like a body bag, but you can't really tell, but it certainly was a bag. Now, remember back at the beginning of this video when I told you how much platinum was taken, okay? 24 pounds. That's something you can carry with one hand. Yet, they're taking it out in a pallet jack. To me, it's pretty obvious that that was Dale's body in that, and it could have been right alongside the platinum. Why else? If there is nothing else missing, why else would you use a pallet jack to remove the items unless it was a body? Remember, a dead body, the weight is very significant. Now, there was no signs of a struggle, right, in there. But my biggest why would be, if you were going to kill Dale, why wouldn't you just leave his body there? Why take it out? maybe to make it look like Dale was involved in this. That again would lead to Dale kind of being a co-conspirator. Maybe Dale was involved in this to the point where he knew who the person was. They had agreed to do this together, and then that person double-crossed Dale and killed him there and took his body out. Let me think about that, because that's a real possibility. But then your offender would have to be pretty sophisticated, I would think. And that falls in line with somebody that's stealing this type of product. I think that they would have to be somewhat sophisticated. But I don't believe Dale would... I don't think, number one, Dale had the means to fence this stuff. He was familiar with, obviously, the plant. More than likely knew about the platinum and the pricing and what that could get. But I don't think he had the means to steal it. Now, Dale knows that those security cameras are running. He knows they're going to capture things. So why does he look up into the camera? Well, you could speculate on that all you want. I don't see that it's saying F you, you know. If that was the case, why wouldn't he just do this to the camera? I think he's not in much of a distress. He's worked there for 30 years. He's not getting killed over this guy that's trying to come in here and steal stuff. But I think the amount of time that it took to do this crime, and Dale was not seen, you know, in any of the subsequent footage after he's seen looking at the camera, tells me that he probably was murdered in there, and the offender felt comfortable that nobody else was there now. It was just him, and he can take the time and commit the crime. Then he doesn't leave with just the platinum. He takes Dale's body. Now, Dale's bodies could not have been disposed of in the furnace because the furnace was not operating that night, according to the sources that I read. Now, you certainly, if you don't leave the body there, the biggest reason would be because it delays everything. It did, right? It did exactly that. 4 days went by before they looked at the surveillance camera. Now, if they would have went in that morning at 7:30 when Dale was supposed to be relieved of his duties and they found his dead body there, police are going to be on it like that. But instead, you don't know there's a theft. You don't know that there's a murder. It's just a missing person. And it doesn't seem like there was that much urgency. So you take the body, then the question, and I don't think he would leave his kids like that. There's so many things that point towards him not being involved, and I really don't believe that he was. Not getting in contact with the family, not being able to properly fence the product, leaving the cigarettes there. I just don't see that. I think he was murdered for sure. But I'm trying to think of how they would dispose of the body. Because if you, as the offender, are taking the body out of the plant, there's got to be, where he went through the reason for that to delay the crime, or at least the identification that a crime has been committed. But where would you dispose of the body? I mean, I know they searched the woods and stuff surrounding the property. I guess that's something that I just don't have an answer for, as to if there was nothing else taken other than that 24 pounds of platinum, it had to have been Dale's body that they took out on the pallet jack. Not that the offender, took out on the pallet jack. Had to have been. There's no other reason. Very surprised they wouldn't have security camera out in the parking lot. But, hey, it is what it is. We know that there was an offender that wore a mask. Now that gets me to, why would the offender wear a mask if Dale was in on it? Dale, by all means, he worked there 30 years, knew obviously about the surveillance cameras. He could have disabled them. He could have painted it black. A million things he could have done. Then him and his co-conspirator could have came in, did what they want, and left. But that didn't happen. The offender comes in wearing a mask. He wants to conceal his identity. Why? Why do people do that? Well, I just said it. To conceal your identity. And again, that offender may have also known that there were surveillance cameras there as well. And him thinking that he would be easily identified because he was a former employee of either a Corning plant elsewhere or a glass manufacturing plant similar to Corning elsewhere. And again, I don't believe that the offender was an employee from that particular plant, because it seemed like Dale had to show him where things were, according to the scent. But I could be wrong on that. Alright, let me go through my notes here and make sure I captured everything that I wanted to get through. This is such an intriguing crime, but I think, again, if we break it down like I did, I think the conclusion is that Dale was murdered, and my only thought is it's either by someone that double-crossed him, which is possible but not probable, or it's a lone offender who Dale maybe recognized in 30 years, had been there, worked there at one point in time, but maybe not. But it's something that Dale was not a part of. He was not a willing participant. Empty holster. Again, that .22 being missing. It could simply be missing because it was in Dale's jacket when he was murdered. Dale certainly, if he was brave enough, not brave enough, smart enough to carry that weapon in case he encountered trouble, would he not have tried to use it to defend his life if he was murdered? I would say yes, but maybe he didn't have time to. Maybe he's waiting for time to use it, and the offender just, kills him before he gets a chance to get it. Pushing the cart with, I already went through that, the manual forklift, 24 pounds. The timeline. I think that's everything that I wanted to get out on this video. If I was investigating this case right now, I would get a list of every employee, more than likely fired employees. I would probably say, at least in the state of Pennsylvania, of glass manufacturing plants. I would start at Corning and then work my way to other glass manufacturing plants. Find anybody that had connections to people that could fence this type of property and had a criminal history and has disappeared. You know what I mean? That they probably, when they stole this, they didn't move right back. They didn't stay in Pennsylvania. They moved. That's how I would start deducing this crime. I would take out, I wouldn't take out completely that Dale was involved, because then I think you kind of get tunnel vision. Keep that there. Keep it there as a possibility, but not probability. Keep your focus on the probability that he had nothing to do with this whatsoever, and we're looking for a single offender, like I just said, past employee of Corning, so-and-so, so and forth, criminal history. That's how I would start deducing this in order to solve this particular crime. I'm sure the state police, the original investigator, I'm sorry that I don't remember his name. I want to say it was Izzo or something like that. He's the one that contacted Unsolved Mysteries back in the day about this case. So he certainly had the right intentions. I don't believe he's one of these investigators that keeps everything close and doesn't want help and has an ego. It doesn't appear at all that he was like this. And he probably has done all of the steps that I am suggesting. But I am more talking to Dale's family, because they certainly have to deal and have dealt with this since 1987, that their father could be a criminal. And that is wrong. They should not be going through life having to feel like that if that's not the case. And I don't think that it was. They deserve to have a proper burial for their father. His remains need to be found. And if I can help to do that, simply by doing a video like this and getting the exposure that maybe not has lacked, but has lacked since, the early mid-80s when Unsolved Mysteries aired this, then that's what I'll do. So that's my thoughts on this case. And I think I presented it in hopefully a chronological, concise, analytical manner that it makes sense. Sometimes it's hard you have to explain the story, because there's no visuals here, right? Other than a couple pictures and newspaper reports. So you have to tell the story, then you have to break down the story in its timelines and its victimologies and suspectologies and such. And then you have to look at both sides, because there's always two camps. He did it, he didn't do it. And then you have to bring that back in to my opinion, because let's face it, it is my channel. So I get to have an opinion and explain why I have that opinion, which I think I've done, and tie that all into a video that hopefully helps law enforcement, and most importantly, the victim and the victim's family and friends. That is of utmost priority for me. Always has been, always will be. So hopefully I've done that in this case, and I've given some sort of respect to Dale Kerstetter and his family, and hopefully can find the offender. Because remember, whether Dale was involved in this or was not, there's still an offender out there. There's still a masked man that needs to be found. That's what I want to do. So hopefully this helped a little bit, and until the next episode, hey, you know what's next. Mains out.